Mhm. Smooth 98.1. It is gone past 7:30 this Thursday morning, which means it's well time to bring you Freshly Pressed. We've got news analysis for the next half hour or so, and I've got my analysts in with me. Oh, I love this combination. In fact, no, not even me. You all love this combination. In the studio, I've got Mr. C. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Sope. Good morning, Lagos.
And I've also got Cheta. Hello, Cheta. It's been a while, and yeah, it's great to have you back on Freshly Pressed.
Yeah, 3 weeks is quite a bit, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So
Up
you, yes. All right, we've got you too. Please, please, please come in with your opinions, your analysis, and your questions as well. Always with those questions. And you can do so up on YouTube where we are streaming live. So if you're on the app, search for Smooth981. If you are coming in on a website, youtube.com/Smooth981FM. The comment section is always available and open to you. Share your thoughts on that section. You can also send WhatsApp messages to 0809 444 981. Let's know what you think up on that platform. And Twitter. If you are a Twitter fan, then go for it. Hashtag Freshly Pressed 981 on Twitter and tag us at Smooth981FM as well. Okay, so we're going to start off with some advice. Now, from the Premium Times, we've got this one. Floods. Ex-security advisor urges Buhari to strip governors of ecological funds. Now, this is a former security advisor to the Bayelsa State government, Perekeme Kodo, who has called on President Buhari to stop releasing ecological funds to the governors because he's saying that the recurrent effects of the floods across the country are enough evidence that these funds are not being used and are being diverted. Cheta, would you agree?
Not exactly. The fact of the matter that this is something that Mr. Kodo probably knows, but as is usual in this country, playing fast and loose with. The fact of the matter is that this current flood, just like the one of 10 years ago, is largely the federal government's fault. And in short, it's actually the fault of the person of Muhammadu Buhari. A bit of history. Back in Cameroon constructed the Lado Dam back in 1979 because of issues on it's basically higher up the valley of River Benue, and they constructed the dam and had an agreement with Nigeria to construct a dam in the old Gongola states. We were supposed to have constructed that dam in 1982. We failed to do that, but the contract was awarded and the construction was supposed to start in 1984. Buhari came in a coup at the end of 1983 and cancelled that project, and the dam was never built. The second dam, the one which was never built, the one which should have been in the old Gongola state, in current Adamawa state, would have been the one that would have been taking the waters whenever Cameroon opened Lado Dam. Because what happens is that whenever the reservoir in Lado Dam is full, the Cameroonians have to open it by default, because they need to open it in order to be able to control the waters. If we had that our own dam, we would have been able to catch the waters from Cameroon and then control the flow, but we can't. That's it. A summary of what's caused these floods. But Mr. Pado is correct as well in the sense that ecological funds have been given to states. So, for example, Kogi State, which is one of the states that has been badly affected by these floods, had ecological funds given to them, I think, in 2020 for the construction of embankments around the confluence, precisely because of this kind of thing. Instead, they used the money to construct some roads, because roads are the sexy kind of thing that they can say, oh, Governor, you understand, that kind of stuff. So that's one of the problems that we have in Nigeria, truthfully, is the fact that we, at the subnational level, a lot of our governors are literally getting away with murder. A state that you can compare with the Kogi experience is Ekiti. Ekiti was given ecological funds as well. They used the ecological funds for what it was meant for. Have you heard of any incident of flood in Ekiti? None.
Okay. All right, thank you for that, Cheta. Mrs. C, I'm coming to you for this one because allegations have been made. A press conference was called, and there's been a plot allegedly uncovered. What say you about this? From this day newspaper, this is a headline: 2023 opposition parties allege plots to stop e-transmission of election results and deactivate BVAS. This was according to political parties, and this is a coalition of united political parties, chairman of political parties, both registered and deregistered, and heads of political associations, yesterday in a joint press conference in Abuja, claimed that they had intercepted intelligence of an alleged fresh plot against the 2023 elections, and this time it was being coordinated by leading figures of the ruling APC. Mr. C, what is afoot?
Okay, thank you, Sope. So let's start with the basics. Under the current Electoral Act, there is actually a provision for the electronic transmission and uploading of results. Now, what had obtained previously in the previous iteration of the Electoral Act, the transmission was usually done manually. So they collate the votes at the polling units, and somebody has to physically take the figures with the electoral sheets, the electoral forms, and the actual ballot papers to the central collation points. And that's where you had incidents of ballot snatching and the likes. Now, the current Electoral Act, like I just said, allows for electronic transmission. Now, there is a conspiracy theory going on that there are plans to subvert that position. Now, it will be interesting to see how these plans will actually come to fruition, because there have been 3 elections using this method: Edo, Osun, and Ekiti, where they use electronic transmission of results. Now, unlike the 2019 or the 2015 election cycles, it is safe to say that more Nigerians have become more interested in the process. And this can be seen in the jump in voter registration numbers. For the last election, we had 84 million potential voters. Now we have 95 million. That's an 11 million increase. Now, it is clear that there are rogue elements within the ruling party who are determined to do everything under the sun to ensure the ruling party wins. And this is against the backdrop of our shared collective experience of the last 7 years. Because truly, in an ideal situation, with what we've collectively gone through, it would be interesting to see how a candidate from the ruling party will win the election next year. It will truly be interesting. Now, they've also alleged that there are plans to remove the incumbent chairman of INEC, arraign him on trumped-up charges. Now, these things sound like fiction or some plot from a Nollywood movie, but we've seen these sort of things happen in Nigeria before.
Truth can be stranger than fiction.
Yes, so whilst we're not giving credence to a conspiracy theory, because of our history, because of what has happened in the past, we cannot totally dismiss it. But here's the thing, right? Because of what we've gone through, Nigerians are more alert, they're more conscious, they're more determined now to have a say in what happens next year. So good luck to anyone who thinks he or his group of people can subvert the will of the majority of Nigerians next year. I really wish him, these sort of people, the best, the very best, because that which they are seeking to sow, they will definitely reap it.
Oh, wow. One difficult there. Now, I'm talking about the will of the majority of Nigerians, of voting Nigerians. Let's take a look at the nation. 95 million voters to elect next president, according to the INEC chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, who made the disclosure at an event organized by the National Endowment for Democracy and the International Foundation for Electoral Systems. This was at the NED headquarters in Washington, D.C., the United States of America. And I'm going to quote him, Cheta, and then come over to you. He said, "We had over 84 million registered voters in 2019, but with the last continuous registration of voters, we're going to add at least 10 million Nigerians, and that will make the register of voters to 95 million. And that's the end of the quote. So, Cheta, what do you make of these numbers? Mr. C has already talked about the kind of rise in the interest of the populace in what happens politically, but 10 million newly registered voters since 2019. What do you make of these numbers?
The number one, INEC has this interesting way of doing maths that that I find hilarious. So you had 85 million registered voters in 2019, and you say you've registered 10 million more. So you're telling us that we'll have 95 million registered voters next year. This presupposes that none of the registered voters from before has died, that none of them has jackpot, that none of them, as in, come on. The real numbers that we should be focusing on are things like turnouts. What was the turnout in 2019? The turnout in 2019 was about 35%. And then, how many people have collected their PVCs? Now, there has been a decline in voter turnout since 2003. In the 2011 election, voter turnout was 54%, which was down from 58% in 2007 and 69% in 2003. In 2015, it was down to 44%, and in 2019, like I mentioned earlier, it was 35%. That indicates a mistrust in INEC's abilities. People don't trust INEC, so as a result of that, they are not coming out to vote. Back in June,
do you think this is a trend that's going to be reversed?
It may be boxed this time around, which is why I talked about PVC collection numbers, and that's where I was going to next.
Okay.
Back in June, SBM Intelligence surveyed PVC collection trends, and we talked with 4,000 people in 8 states across the country. As of that June, when we conducted that survey, 64% of eligible new voters had started the CVR, Continuing Voters Registration process. But of these 64%, of these people who had started the process, only 41% had been able to collect their PVCs. So, so that's a very interesting. Listen, only 41% of 64% have been able to collect their PVCs, which is give or take about 16% of eligible voters had been able to collect their PVCs. Now, of that, of the people who have been able to collect their PVCs, and that's the key thing here, only 23% managed to get their PVCs at first attempt. So you see where this is going. Only 16% of the entire pool had their PVCs. And only 23% of that, which is essentially about 3% of eligible voters, had managed to collect their PVCs at first attempt.
Mm-hmm.
That, in my view, is the number that we should be focusing on. How many people, how many of these 10 million new voters have been able to collect their PVCs? And
so as we go with your suggestion and focus on these numbers, then we have to focus on what to do about those numbers.
Exactly.
And what INEC can do.
Because if we're
I'd love to bring you in on this conversation.
Yeah, because if we're looking at that sample, and extrapolate that based on that sample, it means that of the 10 million new voters that he's telling us we have in the system, only 300,000 have collected their PVCs.
Mr. C, what do you make of that?
Okay, Cheta, I hear you on the figures, but we must remember that INEC has indicated that by the end of next month, those who started the process earlier this year, their PVCs will be ready for collection. So maybe.
Yes, I like that. I like that because because in making that announcement, they said that those who started their PVC their CVR process back in 2020 should have collected their PVCs by now. Am I right?
Correct. So
I know at least 4 people, 2 of them in my office, who did their CVR. One of them fresh registration. The other one transferred to where he lives now. Their PVCs are not ready, both of them.
Okay, Cheta, so let me share with you some other experiences. I also know some people who got notifications their PVCs were ready, went to the centers, and then they were shown heaps of voters' cards on the floor someplace, and they were asked to manually look for their cards. So in that sort of instance, they're not going to collect it because nobody has the time to do that.
Which is part of the problem.
But that
which is part of the problem. That is the
agree.
exact problem. The issue here is number one, filing. Why can't we, at least NIPOST works after a fashion. Why can't we put people's PVCs in the post and mail it to them? Okay, failing that, why can't we catalog them? True. Is it not at least students have been sitting down at home for 8 months? Why can't you get some students, make them useful, get them, give them these PVCs, put each one in an envelope with the person's name, and then catalog it alphabetically,
Cheta,
so that when people come,
you're behind with the times. They might be going back to the classrooms. All right, so we've got to take a quick break. When we get back, we've got more stories for you, and I've got your messages as well. So stick with us. So we have a number of messages coming in, and most of them are I said we have a number of messages coming in, and most of them, not most of them, a large part of them at the beginning were just welcoming Cheta back and saying, I love the combination of Cheta and Mr. C. Because we're on YouTube, I might as well take Baba Femi's message. So Tayo Olubode says, greetings, Cheta, on YouTube. Baba Femi Onogbeson says, Cheta and Mr. C online today. This combination has no match. They love you guys. And has asked for at least one positive story today.
Do we have a positive
What's
story?
our positive story of the day?
I need to check.
Do we have one?
The one that we just did is positive.
I think you ate that positivity and that's something else.
Okay, number 7.
All right, we've got to go back in studio. All right, let's get on with reading your messages. So remember, you can go up on the comment section on youtube.com/smooth981FM Lagos. Tayo, Ayo, and Baba Femi, see your messages. Thank you. And, we address that off air. Foruchi and Ozzy, who have sent welcoming messages and messages of happiness regarding the combination of Mr. C and Cheta. Thank you. Now I'll take this message from Nero Cello from Ogudu, who says, electronic transmission is optional, not mandatory, and INEC may or may not use it. APC is trying desperately so hard to play the same card they played against the Chief Justice in the last election.
Let me quickly jump. That's not correct. Under the Electoral Act, it is mandatory.
Tajuddin from Alimosho says, I know these men are wiser. They know they cannot dare us all. So he goes on to say that we are more in numbers than the security outfits in Nigeria. And Dami from Ikeja says, if you move ecological funds from state governments to the federal government, it only means that the funds that would disappear in Jos or Enugu will disappear in Abuja. What problem does that solve? Shagun says, shouldn't successive presidents since 1984 have had a second look at the abandoned dam project that could have prevented this flooding? Questions. And Imo Edgar from Ikorodu says, Cheta, your wisdom, love it. B from Lucky has this to say, INEC cleared the database of 2.7 million spurious registrants. There are 10 million new registrants. Less than 1 million have picked up their PVCs. Given our antecedents, INEC must announce a clear, actionable plan to deal with these PVCs, or the credibility of the election is already in question. And more messages are coming in. Do remember, you can also take it to Twitter, #freshlypressed981. But let's move on now to our next story. And this one comes in from this day. Oh, Mr. C, let's talk about new Chief Justice, newly sworn in Chief Justice of Nigeria, Olukayode Ariwala, who has had something to say. And from the headline from this day newspaper, stop mounting pressure on judiciary. That's what he told politicians. He's called on politicians across the country to stop mounting this pressure on the judicial arm of government. And with the 2023 general elections approaching, he has especially appealed to them, saying that they should, and I quote, allow the judiciary to function. I'm going to take another quote saying, we shall continue to do justice if only Nigerians will allow us to perform and function without any pressure. What do you think about his words? Or what do you have to say about his words?
Okay, thank you, Shokwe. So congratulations to Justice Ariwala on the confirmation of his appointment. Previously, he had been acting in that capacity. Now we hear him when he says politicians should stop putting pressure on the judiciary. But this is not a development that started today or yesterday. It's been with us for a very long time.
Forever.
Okay, fine. So take your minds back to even the events leading up to the 1993 election, when the Association for a Better Nigeria got some controversial court judgment or court order. So this is a problem that has stayed with us. Now, it's one thing to say or to appeal that the politicians should leave them alone. It's another thing for the judiciary to actually step up and continue to deliver proper justice that everyone can appreciate. We've been inundated with conflicting judgments coming out from different divisions of the same court. Case in point, the Court of Appeal. So the Court of Appeal will sit in Abuja, give a decision on a matter. Similar facts, similar issues, the Court of Appeal, Port Harcourt, will give a completely different judgment. And then you are faced with a quandary. There are two conflicting judgments coming out from the same court. Now, Justice Ariwala says, we're computerizing the Supreme Court, we're making it possible for cases to be heard electronically, remotely. This is good news, but we're behind. This is something that should have been done since. Now, two, also look into the quality of people who are being appointed to the bench. I'm a practicing lawyer, and I've had the regrettable, I've had instances where I've appeared before some judges and I wasn't sure what they were doing. They're judges. So, yes. And then we've also seen instances of justices being arraigned for corruption, justices being dismissed for corruption. So it's a two-way street. It's not, so yes, politicians leave them alone, but we know the politicians will not leave them alone because the politicians do not like to play by the rules. The politicians do not seem to have consciences. The politicians are prepared to break every law possible once there's an opportunity. So this is where a strong judiciary comes in. Each and every time you get the opportunity to uphold the law, do it without fear or favor.
Because for me, it seemed a little interesting hearing his words, because I felt that it should be the opposite. It should be the inverse, that the judiciary should be the ones applying pressure, because through application and of the law, i.e. this is the law. So if you're going to go about breaking it, then we have the chance to be able to say, according to the law, this is what happens.
And yes, I agree with you completely, Shokwe. And in addition, the judges in Nigeria need to step up several notches. They're doing a very good job given the circumstances they're faced with on a daily basis. But they need to step up, cut out all
Mr. C, the politician comes out.
We move on before we get stuck in this story. From the Daily Trust, no plan to privatize TCN. That is what the federal government says. The Ministry of Power saying that there's just absolutely no plan to sell the transmission company of Nigeria, regardless of the statements that have been flying around and the rumors that have been circulating. So in a statement on Wednesday, the ministry urged the public to dismiss statements regarding a non-existing plan to privatize the transmission company. And well, Cheta, I'm coming over to you for this one. Considering the fact that when we that there have been these calls for privatization of the transmission part of the power supply chain, which is said to be the weakest link in that chain, these are pretty strong words from the Ministry of Power. What are your thoughts?
It's so we may as well do put the story as no plans to improve power soon. That's the headline that they should just put. At the end of the day, Nigeria has an installed power generating capacity for 12 gigawatts. By the time we have all the losses and everything that goes through the decrepit thing that we call a national grid, it is an average of 4 gigawatts that gets to the discos to distribute. I am not saying that the discos are paragons of efficiency and all of that. The privatization the process for the discos could have been done better. But at least from the Genco side of it, which is also privatized, we can see solid improvements for those who had been following the whole thing for a long time. The weak link remains that transmission, which is in government hands. And it's weak because, number one, it's a monopoly. There's no effect, there's no incentive for efficiency. As we speak, for example, in Magodo, where I live, we've not had lights for a few days. Remember that Magodo is under the willing buyer, willing seller thing that Fashola pushed when he was Minister for Power. So we've had relatively efficient power. But we've not had lights for a couple of days. The question is why? And the answer is transmission. There's a problem on the transmission line. And how many times this year has the national grid broken down? 17? 18?
7.
That's the one that they've admitted to.
And that's the one they couldn't get away with.
Exactly.
That is the number we'll go with, the official number. Thank you very much.
Please.
Yes.
At least 3 guerrilla newspapers have reported that it's up to 17 times. Whatever. Let's go with the official number. 7 times is 7 times too many in 2022. National grid, the whole country will just go off without light, and then you are refusing to privatize. So just change that headline. No plan to end power outages in Nigeria soon.
The Nation newspaper, Senate passes 66 billion naira police trust fund budget. Mr. C.
I'm shocked that the Senate actually did this, and I'm going to explain why. So there's a background to all of this. In 2020, the Rivers State government sued the Attorney General of the Federation and the 35 other Attorney Generals of the state. Now, what was the basis of the suit? That by virtue of Section 162 of the Constitution, it is illegal to fund the Nigerian Police Trust Fund. So let's circle back. The Nigerian Police Trust Fund was set up ostensibly to provide funding for the Nigerian Police Force outside its regular source of funding, right? And Section 41A and B of the Act setting up the Police Trust Fund say that an amount constituting 0.5% of the total revenue accruing to the Federation account and a levy of 0.005 of the net profit of companies operating in Nigeria. Now, the Rivers State High Court proceeded to the Federal High Court and said, that's nonsense, because under the Constitution, the only entities that can take money out of the Federation account or are entitled to monies in the Federation account are the federal government, the state governments, and the local governments. There is no mention of the Police Trust Fund. And that is completely illegal. And the Federal High Court upheld that submission. Now that matter is on appeal. So now this nonsense.
So this is interesting.
Yeah, so this Senate bill, where did they get the money from? Now, the AGF again has done something very wonderful. He says, remove River State's allocation, right, and keep it in escrow. While the other 35 states contribute money and fund the Nigerian Police Trust Fund. And it's interesting to note that in 2021, no money was released to this agency. So if no money was released last year because of this pending litigation matter, how are you suddenly comfortable approving money for 2022 or 2023?
Oh boy, we may have to talk about this at a later date, but I want to just quickly focus on one last story very quickly, Cheta. I want to get your thoughts on this. The bell seems to keep belling. From the Punch newspaper, 2023, PDP postpones presidential campaign to placate Wike.
So, like I said earlier, I think it was 5 weeks ago, sometime in September, when Wike traveled to first see Tinubu and then to see Peter Obi. Wike is desperately struggling for his post-election survival. Remember, he's not on any ballot, so he's facing irrelevance. And I think that he's going about it the wrong way, because what he's going to end up doing is he will wreck his party's chances, and he still will not be relevant after the election. Remember that Amechi is still a doyen in the APC, and Amechi has no love at all for Wike. So if APC wins, APC will come after Wike. It's just very interesting to see somebody in a position of power actively doing anti-party, and the party is unable to put its foot down and expel him. It's
No,
just a very interesting commentary
But
on,
Cheta,
yeah.
very quickly, he's espousing principles of justice and fairness. Now the party is lopsided in
He's
favor of the North.
Gentlemen, this is
the
a
same
conversation we
wiki.
will
Yeah,
continue
sure.
off
But let me
air.
just point out something to Mr. C. The same wiki promised during the PDP convention that whoever won, he would support that person.
And we're done. Thank you. Let me just read these messages up on YouTube to end the show, because this is an interesting one from Taiwo Ariwala, who says, my PVC, which I was never able to collect, was found on the roadside by a complete stranger. Whilst Joy Ukaha says, separate TCN by regions and allow investors to come into play. TCN cannot be managing the entire power lines from comfortable Abuja. Allow 4 TCN regions to manage Nigeria. And that is where we end the show. Thank you so much to all of you who have sent in your messages, who have listened, who have watched, wherever you are. Just if you've participated, thank you. And to my analysts, thank you. Make sure you find them up online. Cheta is at Chickster, CHXTA, and Mr. C is at Monsieur C, and there are 3 E's after that C. Thank you, gentlemen.
Today's Lola's birthday. Please help me wish her happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday,
Lola.
Lola Nwaze. Wow. Oh, yeah.
Happy birthday.
Everybody, take it over to Twitter and wish her happy birthday. Thank you. All right, coming up 8:15, it's the Grapevine. All right, and we are done. Thank you, gentlemen.